Hello and welcome to Sports Talk. My name is Jamie Kepp and I'll be the host for today's show. Our guest is Jeff Booz. He's the head basketball coach at Sun Prairie High School. Coach, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Jamie. I appreciate it and look forward to being on it.
Certainly happy to have you. How about a little bit of personal background about yourself that you care to share with the viewers?
Well, I started this basketball coaching journey back in 1982 in a small town down in the southern part of the state over by Prairie du Chien, Seneca, Wisconsin. I spent 3 years there, and then from there I went up north, up above Green Bay, where a town called Crivitz, Wisconsin. So I spent a year at Crivitz. So that was 4 with the small schools, and I was fortunate enough to get the Medford job.
Okay.
I was in Medford for 5 years, and in 1990 I had an opportunity to go back to Winona, Minnesota, where I went to school at Winona State University and take the Winona High job. And I was there 1 year, and we got caught in a teacher layoff deal. My wife was, we had been married for 2 years, and we were really looking forward to being there, and we got caught in a cutback there. I did in my profession, teaching and coaching, and so I ended up back in Wisconsin at Altoona for 2 years. And then what was really weird about the whole situation, when I was interviewing for positions when I was in Winona to get back into the state of Wisconsin, I interviewed at Sun Prairie in '92, and I was one of the finalists but didn't get the job. And so I went and took the head boys basketball coaching job at Altoona, Wisconsin, along with a teaching position. I was there in '92 to '94, and again, the athletic director from Sun Prairie reached out to me and see if I was interested in coming back or taking a look at it again. And I said, sure, I'd take a look. And this time around, I was fortunate enough to get it. And I've been at Sun Prairie for 27 years.
That's incredible. Growing up, was it just basketball or was it all sports?
Basketball was my real heart. It was in my heart. It was something I did when I was little, all the way up through high school, and I was fortunate enough to play at college at Winona State, so I just had a real feel and a love for the game, and I just really enjoyed being around it. So I've been around it for 40 years. This is my 40th year, 39th as a head coach, and that was one time a freshman assistant coach.
Boy, that's incredible. I mean, just you think of the longevity piece and how things must have changed through the years. Just, you talk about like the Phi Ed job.
Yep.
Now you look at how many applicants there are for a coaching job versus what there would have been 10 or 20 years ago.
For sure.
So few.
Right. What's interesting is you say that, when I was going through that, moving up the chain or the coaching profession, or trying to move your way up into the bigger schools, you just didn't throw your name in a hat. I mean, there was already names in the hat. You know what I mean? They're guys that were already, had set themselves apart from the rest, with whether they had great programs somewhere else. And now today, as you know, as an athletic director, how difficult it is to get a coach.
Right.
And combine that with a teaching position and have them, be part of the program, part of the system.
There used to be such an opportunity when there was a Phi Ed job or a teaching job in general, to fit it with a strong candidate that was also involved in extracurriculars. And now those vacancies just don't exist, or there's other ideas for those vacancies, which makes it a little bit tough because, you look around the state and the number of teachers that coach, it's a small number now.
It's getting smaller and smaller, and I think you made a great point. Our educational system and the direction that we're kind of going is getting away from the teacher coach, and putting maybe more emphasis on the teacher side of it and not so much on the coach. But there's such a benefit of having the coach and being in the school, in the relationships outside of what goes on in practice and dealing with your kids, and not only your varsity kids, but your younger kids that they see you on a daily basis, whether that's your sophomores or your freshmen. And there's nothing to replace that.
I don't think there is either, and I think it's really when people don't value it or don't recognize it, it's a great error in judgment.
I would agree.
Because it's not just the content, and I don't want this to become like me bickering about the education system, but when people don't realize it's not just about content, that it's about the relationship piece, kids are going to learn more when they have a relationship with somebody. And so if it's with sports, if it's with co-curriculars or whatever it may be, whatever like the niche is, there's going to be more learning. It's going to be a better experience for the students versus just now looking at someone who has expertise in this subject area only without maybe the ability to communicate or interact or develop those relationships.
Big difference, huge, you know, and being able to make that connection during the daytime versus always having to make it in the practice side of it. You know, and there's a different person that is in the classroom than there is on the floor. You know, when you get to see the kids outside of the floor, that environment versus the environment in your classroom, and the relationship starts to grow itself outside of that and then continue to be built through the athletics part of it.
It sure does, and taking it one step further, it allows the kids to see you as a coach or whoever in the coaching staff is in the building in a different light as well.
For sure.
They might just think, okay, I'm some crazy lunatic that's a basketball coach, and they're going to see me in a different light, you know, that has, you know, you have the same caring components, but you have different pressures depending upon the circumstances and the opportunity. You know, as a classroom teacher, sometimes you're down to the wire with time, sure, with basketball or coaching in general you are, but there's also those gaps. It's those before the bus rides, it's after school, it's lunchtime.
Right.
It's in the hallways. It's almost those, I view those informal interactions as important as anything.
They're awesome. They're unbelievable when you have those, because there's a real deep connection between you and the player, and it goes beyond the X's and O's of what takes place after school, you know, and they really see that. And the bottom line of it all is it's supposed to be a great experience for these young men and women that are playing high school sports.
You know, that's the hope too, you know, and sometimes there's company lines people have and whatever else. And, you know, I think it's important, like I look at from an administrative lens right now, is to, I have two roles when it comes to my coaches. One is, well, first with the kids, is to try to make it the best experience they can experience in high school and make the best memories. That doesn't mean it's easy, doesn't mean they're not going to be coached hard. And from a coaching standpoint, I just try to deflect any external pressure they're getting so they can do the job they were hired to.
Sure, absolutely.
I think it's as simple as that. And I think when you've been in the position of coaching, you realize the pressures and the second guessing and all that shenanigans that goes on behind the scenes. We don't get phone calls now.
No.
You know, so someone calls, you know, me about, you know, Tommy the freshman that says, you know, Tommy's not playing. I talk to the parent and I say, hey, what did Tommy's coach say when Tommy talked to him? Well, he didn't. And I said, you know, I'm not trying to be short with you, but our phone call is respectfully over until that happens.
Right.
And I'm not dismissing them or ridiculing them or shutting them down, and I hang up the phone. Now they don't call because all those things are in place, and they realize the coaches are going to be supported. You know?
Absolutely.
And I think that's invaluable, because if you have, my feeling is, if you have people that are in the administrative role of athletics and they understand and they've experienced the coaching pieces, I think that's the best of both worlds.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you look around and you look at administration, and it's more of an educational administration than it is a sports administration. And I'm not saying that you have to have a sports background,
Right.
but it sure helps in dealing with the things that go outside of the game itself. You know, like you just said. And I think when you have those things connected, it's just better for your athletic program from the top down. You know, and everybody gets an idea, these are the standards, these are expectations, whether it's boys basketball or girls softball or whatever it is. This is what we stand for. This is what we want. This is the way we go about our business. And I think those are really, really important to have in place.
I think they are too, because it shows that that's the bigger lessons.
Yeah.
It's not just the winning piece, because, you know, you were going to have all memories, and we think back to when we played sports. We didn't remember every record. We didn't remember every game. It was the camaraderie components that were attached with it, as much as anything.
It's funny you said that, because we had a ball game on Saturday down at Racine Horlick. Okay, and the guys have been teasing me probably since Thursday, a couple of the players, about this new dance they call the nitty. Okay, and I don't know if you know anything about the nitty.
No,
or not,
I don't know anything.
But being close to Madison, all
I better
that
write
stuff
that
breaks.
down.
Yeah,
Okay.
for sure. But they said, you know, Coach, we went on Saturday. You got to do the nitty. You know, and well, I don't know. When you say the nitty, I think of the nitty gritty and
I was going to say
the restaurant.
Yeah,
but
there's the burger.
For sure. So we were fortunate to pull one off on the road. And as I was walking across the court, I was kind of the last one of the coaches, and I could see, you know, there was some energy in our locker room. I could hear it a little bit as I walked in, and as I came around the corner, these guys were all just hooting and hollering. There's guys all over the place and just very, really excited. And of course, one of the kids comes up to me and says, "Hey, Coach, what did I tell you?" I said, "If we won, you have to do the nitty." And I said, "Well, I really don't know what the nitty is, trying to work my way out of it. You know, there's no way you're working your way out of it, Coach. This is how it goes." And so one of the kids does it. And so my son, which is a lot younger than I am, obviously, he did it first. And one of the other coaches followed, and they were just right there ready for me. And I knocked it out for about 15 seconds, and the place went nuts, you know, and the kids were just unbelievable.
And how does someone measure that? It's it's unmeasurable.
You know, and what's funny is I was on a podcast this morning, and somebody, I think my son had sent it to the guy that ran the podcast, so he texted it to me this morning. So because they had their phones out, and you know how that whole world works.
Oh my goodness, the
way
world of
beyond what I do.
phones.
But here I am. Here it is. They had it out. I pulled it up this morning, and he had sent it to me, and sure enough, it was about a 10-second clip of me in the locker room.
Oh, Jiminy Crickets.
Yes. So I showed one of the kids that today, Coach. It was unbelievable. They got such a big kick out of that. It was unreal.
That's funny.
Yeah.
You know, and that, you know, we talk about all the changes through the years, and there are a lot of changes and different things. Some of it's skill level, some of it's athleticism, some of it's parenting, some of it's the AAU world, but some of this stuff stays the same as well. And
Sure.
those are indicators it stays the same. The phone piece is odd and weird and new, and that's a change. But that whole relationship piece and what's gained from what happens behind closed doors, or used to be the sanctuary of the locker room, but now there's the darn phone in there.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know,
You travel wherever they go, they have their phones. You know, it's just a different deal. It's a different world that we live in with them. And you know, sometimes I wonder. I always try to go back to this, and I tell them often of this: where your feet are is where your head needs to be. You know,
Right.
and you don't feel that all the time. You know, and so you just go back to ground one and just kind of remind them, hey, you know what, this is what's really going on, you know, and stuff. So.
What area did you grow up in, Wisconsin?
Yep,
What
Chippewa
area?
Falls.
Okay.
So.
Who'd you have for some role models growing up, whether that was in the adult world or older players, and then when you were young as a coach, who were some of the people you looked up to?
Well, I'll tell you, you know, I was fortunate to play for Sweet Swenson, who was an outstanding high school coach at Chippewa Falls.
Okay.
And I think he had a major impact on me, just in the sense of allowing me to become a player, you know, supporting the open gyms, getting in the gym. You know, I was kind of like a gym rat a little bit, not overly talented by any means, but I worked at the game. I put a lot of time in, and he always rewarded us with that by having the gym open or giving us access to it. And that was back in the late 70s, you know, 76, 77, 77, 78, you know, and there was a lot of restrictions back then, but we looked forward to those open gyms on Monday and Wednesday nights, or he would come in on the office on Saturdays or Sundays. He was the athletic director, and his son was a younger player, so we'd get in the gym and play 3-on-3, you know.
Right.
You know, and he was very instrumental in me becoming a coach. I wanted to be a coach, and then I was fortunate enough to go to Winona State and then play there for 4 years, and then just get the mind to, hey, I want to take this to another level now, and now I want to go coach. But what's amazing about coaching is this, that, you know, when I was graduated in 82 out of Winona State University, I got my head job right away at Seneca, which was a school of about 130 kids at the time. Okay, so I took on the K through 12 physical education position. I was the freshman class advisor. I was head of the newspaper or the magazine sale. I was middle school basketball coach and head boys basketball coach. So, you know, you play this game and you think you really have it down and you really understand it, but I'll tell you what, I learned a lot, you know, and I learned a lot. It took me a long period of time before I really became comfortable of what I was doing in this profession, you know, and that was the beauty of it. The one thing that I missed along the way was I was never an assistant for somebody. I never learned from somebody. I never watched somebody else do this thing. So it's always been trial and error, listen to somebody or follow someone's lead and then try it, you know. So that's the one piece I missed. But I've been fortunate to be around some great people. You know, I think Coach Bennett at Point in Green Bay and Wisconsin was a big person in my belief in how to do certain things. You know, I was around John Nicholas at Eau Claire Memorial, Pat Hammond at North, Eli Kroger at Watertown. I've just been around a lot of really, really good coaches, Jerry Pettigrew at Cuba City, and you know, you just keep growing. You just keep learning the game. You learn some things along the way, and you build a philosophy, and you kind of tinker with it as you go, and it's kind of where it's been for me. So,
looking back, and obviously the times change, and you have more experience when you're at bigger schools and smaller schools. Did you coach differently from a bigger school to a smaller school? And if so, what was the difference? It may not have been any.
Well, it's interesting to say that because I think there is. I think the one thing when you get into maybe the smaller, the medium-sized school like a Medford or, Altoona, those schools, Crivets and Seneca, you really had control of your program, okay, from the kindergarten all the way up to 8th grade or high school. You had control in your feeder program. And that was a big thing back then. You developed your own feeder program. Hey, if you were going to build a program, you were doing it Saturday mornings in the gym.
Sure were.
And you were doing it, with maybe your assistants or some other people, but most of it was going through you. I think what's hard in the big school is you have a lot of other people that have their fingers in the pot, okay? Whether it's your local YMCA or whether it's your local club or whether it's an AU organization. And now getting them people on the same page and developing the kids the way you want to develop them, that's a real challenge, and to get them to understand some of the things that you want your kids to know as they arrive in your program as freshmen or whether they're 8th graders or 7th graders is really difficult. And I think is really challenging today.
I think that's a great comparison. When I think about the bigger schools and the examples you used, some of those organizations are about the individual aspect of the kid, where the high school coach and the high school program is about the team, kind of the we over the me type thing.
Absolutely.
And that's a tough thing to get through the melanin between the ears sometimes, because who knows what the kids are hearing from different directions.
Yeah. I go back to this, and this is the greatest thing about high school sports. They're a privilege.
They sure are.
Okay? And the hardest thing that I think is going on today in sports is that we miss the value of what sports are really all about. Okay? And, it's funny, we were talking about this, but I had a little conversation with our club the other day about this. Too many of the kids today value their playing time. Their worth is only through their playing time.
Right.
And when they're not playing, they're not happy. Versus, we look at you as a valued person, not as a basketball player. But their vision is all structured around how am I playing? And if I'm not playing, then I'm not happy. If I'm not happy, then I don't want to be part of something. Hey, we all are part of something. We all have a role. And it's so important, and that's why it's called, athletics is an extension of the classroom. That's the growth period of what's supposed to take place, and that piece is, I think, is that we've gotten away from,
Oh, it sure is. We know doing this so long about the piece and the role of education-based athletics, and the other piece is there's so much, through the last 10, 15 years, whatever number of years, there's so much specialization in a sport. And there's so much to be said for, you play football. I'll just randomly say these three sports, but you play football and you might be a good contributor. Basketball, you might be a starter or one of the main guys, or you might be a role player that's a 7th, 8th, 9th person. Or you might just not get much playing time and you might be the starting pitcher.
Right.
Whatever the case is, what a great lesson, though, to be a star, be okay, and then be on the bench where you're making your teammates better, just of understanding the roles. And so the sports that you play more in, it gives you a little better understanding of what those other kids on that team are going through too.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think the biggest thing that you see with your 2 or 3 sport athletes, and the bottom line too of sports, it's about competition.
Right.
Right.
That's the great part about it.
That's the most awesome piece about it. You're competing night in and night out, whether you're doing it in practice or whether you're doing it in the games. But you can see that a little bit different as you go through this versus a 2 or 3 sport athlete versus a single guy that may only be doing it as one sport. And I think that's the whole piece of sports is the competitiveness.
Right.
Your drive, your willingness to compete against someone else.
For whatever it may be, too.
Absolutely.
So as you think about this, you think about the career piece for you, and as you went on and what you've learned, how do you coach differently now than you did 10 or 15 or 20 years ago? Is there a difference in approach,
I would say,
or is it the same?
I would say it's more transformational.
Okay.
Okay. More in the sense that I've kind of taken an approach that I want my team, I want the kids to, that's their team. Okay, obviously I understand my role as the leader,
Right.
but the reality of it's really their team.
Right.
Okay, and to get them in a position of they're going to take personal ownership in their team. Okay, and it starts with your captains, it starts with all those kinds of things taking place. Okay, and so that's what I've tried to learn, that's what I've learned over the last 4 or 5 years of this journey, is that I've become much more of that with our players in our program. And I guess I would say, to top it off, it's your culture. It's what is your culture? This is what our culture is all about. This is our expectations. These are the standards that we're going to be. You know, this is the non-negotiables, okay? But when it's all said and done, it's a players-led team, not a coach-led team.
Well, I think, you know, I think it's pretty well understood a coach-led team is going to have a little lower ceiling and some limitations, and when things aren't going quite so well, there's a look this way versus the teammate piece and the accountability, the self-accountability within your teammates.
Absolutely. You know, and that's a hard thing for kids.
It sure is.
You know, working with captains and getting them to understand the bar, and then raising their bar, but not only that, but in their teammates' bar to get it to the level of what they needed to get to, you know. But when you look at all the research that's done, that kids react a much more differently to kids than they do adults.
Certainly.
You know, so that's kind of the approach that we've tried to take over there from a competitive side of it.
Let's regress just a little bit. How have you changed from a teacher from
Well,
years ago till now?
Great question. You know, I've been retired now for 2 years. So I guess, you know, the thing that I learned more than anything in the teaching profession, just like coaching, it's all about relationships with your kids. You know, one of my goals was always to get to know my students outside of them being a student. What's their likes? What's their dislikes? What do you have a job? What, you know, making a connection outside of the actual part of them being in school, and then being able to connect with them that way. And what's really interesting is, as I've been retired and been around the community a little bit, so many former students will come up to me and say, "Hey, Coach, I really enjoyed your class because you cared about me." You know, not from so much of a knowledge side or getting to know this or that, but I got to know them as a person, you know, and that's a piece I really miss. And it's really nice to have those, you know, when somebody comes up to you and communicates to you. So I kind of think that's the way it was for me, and I try to be that way. The kids will always tease me, "Coach, we were always intimidated by you because, you know, you wanted it done this way, this way, this way." But, you know, it was part of the deal too. So
How do you remember? How do you put the names to all those faces, and how do you remember the names?
I don't. That's a problem when I arrive somewhere, and then somebody will come up to me and they'll start talking to me, and then eventually go, "Coach, you do remember me?" "Sure, absolutely. I remember you in strength and conditioning class. I mean, you work." It's hard, but, you know, I try to put myself to it. My wife will maybe help me out, or some of my assistants might be sitting there or somebody, but it's difficult, but I try to do my best.
Well, you try to, and the reason is just not, you don't want to hurt anyone's feelings.
Absolutely.
You know, it's not the intent or anything like that. I think now I've gotten to the old enough place where I can say, "Hey, I just can't put a name to the face. Can you help me?"
Absolutely.
And I think we're old enough and humble enough to
For sure.
sometimes that can happen to do it. And
We've all been humbled before.
right, there's no, isn't that the truth?
That is for sure.
You know, so as you look at the basketball piece for you, you know, and I talked a little bit before about the difference of coaching and teaching. How has the game changed? Has it changed through the years, and has it changed for some good, some not so good? What's a perception for you?
Well, that's a great question. You know, I've been asked to be on a few committees. One would be like for the shot clock, you know, and I think the game is changing. You know, I think the game has become more of a spread attack. You know, more maybe a little bit more guard orientated, less inside play. I think the shot clock is intriguing to a lot of people. It'll be interesting to see how it all finalizes itself out in the state of Wisconsin. But I go back to this question to everybody, is that if we're going to make a decision, who do you think should be the first to be able to be surveyed? I think the kids should be. Okay, it would be interesting to see what the kids would survey of whether they would want a shot clock or not. Because the bottom line, it's about the kids.
Right.
Okay, we're serving kids. So if that's something that they want to be part of and they want that to be their experience in the basketball side of it, then I think we should make that a go. You know, I think we're trending that way. Whether that happens or not, I don't know. I think AAU has become a big player in trickle-down effect into the high school. Okay,
Right.
And you had mentioned it earlier. I just think that we're playing so much now. Whether it's AAU, whether it's your own high school program, you're hoping it's your high school program, or kids are playing somewhere else, but just back to basic habits, you know, of the game. You know, when you talk about soundness or you talk about fundamental bases, whether it's offense or defense, you know, I see those pieces missing, you know, and that's the beauty. That's what I always enjoyed about high school. You get the base, you get those things done, you know, and it elevates your program. But it's hard to do it today because you're always battling an outside program, whether it's, like I said, club ball or AAU
Right.
or something. You
Fill
know,
in the blank.
Yep, whatever.
You know, whatever it may be.
And,
That's a tough thing. You know, the shot clock is intriguing to me. I don't know that it's a needed fix because necessarily what's broken type thing. People certainly will have their opinions at the end of a game and of stalling or different things like that. But I look at the other way. I think there's going to be a lot of terrible forced shots, and it will really benefit good defensive teams that are good already.
Right.
Because people are going to turn the ball over in today's world, and now they'll just force a shot because you're going to put a little pressure on if you're a even amount team or a little better to get that shot clock down a little bit to get across the timeline.
Sure, they'll
And
change that up for sure.
You know, and some of those variables will come into play too. And it's I look at the administrative piece, not just the cost, but it's going to be hard to find people that run it that know the rules.
Yeah, it's going to take a while. It'll take a probably 2 to 3 year deal before people get comfortable with it, you know, and people are concerned about what happens if it's not working. You know, there's a lot of red flags up about it, but as you know, I don't know if you know this, but the state of Iowa and Minnesota now are in the process of putting it in, you
Right.
know, and so being so close to them. I believe Illinois may be on a trial basis right now with it. So, you know,
It's probably going to happen.
it's going to happen down the road. I don't know when.
Yeah.
You know, and I think it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. I think the one thing that'll be really interesting from a coaching side of it is when that clock gets down, how you get organized offensively. When it gets under 10, you know, what are you going to go to?
Right.
You know, how are you going to script your sets or your offense, or how are you going to, you know, and that's going to change coaching. It's going to make you rethink about the game.
I think it does too. I think there's been a big change now, not coaching anymore, and I watch and observe when all the schools come in. I think there's been a big change from quarters to halves.
Yeah.
And I think probably the part that's people aren't recognizing is the most important piece is that 18 and a half is probably between like 8 and 12 minutes. If that isn't managed well by a coach from a rest or a foul trouble standpoint, that's a really dangerous time.
Yep. Yeah.
And you get somebody in, you know, we talked before, you know, you look at yourself, you're not in this category, and I wouldn't have been in there either too. You know, you pay your dues through whatever form that was. But you look at our combination of either very experienced officials along with very experienced coaches, or officials that really probably shouldn't be at the varsity level, or very inexperienced varsity coaches. That side is a bad combination and doesn't make for the best basketball because there's not necessarily the coping skills, there's not the game management, there's not the patience. I mean, there's a lot of variables that come into play, and it doesn't create the best environment either.
Challenging for an athletic director, very challenging, you know. And like we said before, you're seeing less and less people want to coach. And it's the same thing, I think, in refereeing, you know. When I think about officials, and I've seen some tremendous officials come through in my
Right.
time, you know, that's not only in the Madison area, but being other parts of the state. I think what's happening is they're learning situations occurring at the youth level, okay? But you look at these youth tournaments and you look at how people are treating your officials at an early age, 7th, 8th grade, whatever, 5th grade, 6th grade, and just the abuse that they are taking at that level. And now there's no, why would you want to do this?
Right.
Okay, instead of backing off and letting, this is their time to grow as an official. This is where you learn the game. It's
Sure
just
do.
like us when we learn the game. You know,
Sure
you
do.
learn it at a lower level, you move your way up. You know, but they're losing that because of the negativity that's taking place, whether that would be at an club game or tournament or whatever it might be. They're losing that, and we're losing quality people along the way. You know, and it's gonna, as you know, as an athletic director, the numbers show that we are shorthanded in officials.
We sure are. Closing comments here for you.
Yep.
Let's finish with the positive, you know, whether that's 1, 5, 20, 38 years. Let's talk about the enjoyment you've had as a high school basketball coach up to this point.
My number one thing that I've enjoyed more than anything is building a team. And when you build a team, you can feel it. Okay, you feel it when you win, you feel it when you've been defeated. But you see them get back up on their feet and you go to work and you continue to grow. To me, that's the greatest accomplishment I think you can have in sports.
That's a great way to end our show. Once again, our guest, Jeff Booz, he's the head basketball coach at Sun Prairie High School. And this concludes another edition of Sports Talk. Until next time, keep talking sports. Coach, thanks for being here.
Thank you. Appreciate it.